Welcome to Cash Flow and Tell, the podcast that uncovers answers to your toughest questions about growing your business from a working capital perspective. Hosted by the people of Fund Through, we dive into real stories and lessons from CEOs, finance pros, and business owners just like you. Today, we're covering how to scale smart despite growing costs. Now, here's your host, Helen Shacklett, Senior Growth Manager at Fund Through, joined by today's guest, Lauralee Sheehan, Founder and Chief Creative Officer at Digital 55.
To explore our topic today, we have Lauralee Sheehan. She is the co-founder and Chief Creative Officer of Digital 55. So, Lauralee, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Just living the entrepreneur life.
Right. No, I hear that. All right. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the founder of Digital 55, and we're indie producers of digital and media content. So the company has been full-time for 8 years now, or 7.5, I think, which I can't. Every day I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe it, because it just still seems like it's, the first year or something sometimes. But we get to do some really cool work. So we work on unscripted media projects and subculture content. And then we also partner produce with a lot of different organizations on their knowledge content. So we help people adapt content and sort of design and produce media and storytelling content. So we get to work on a lot of emerging subject matters and a lot of kind of social purpose content and digital experiences for people. So some of those partnerships we've been able to work on, like some huge projects that are really purposeful. And so it's kept us busy.
No doubt. No, that is so meaningful and such a unique purpose. Love that. So I would love to hear about how Digital 55 has grown over time and what you think has contributed to the growth.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I've been thinking a lot about that. So I think one of the things that was probably a big part of the growth just in the beginning was just being so in demand, like just people really, like the digital content explosion was happening when I took the company full time. So I feel like the timing was on my side to say people are trying to produce content really quickly. They have a lot of content they need to digitize. It has to be meaningful, interactive. People want storytelling. So we were just really prepped to be experts and innovators in that space sort of around the time that everybody was looking for that. So that did really help with being able to bring on big projects right on day one of full-time operations sort of thing. I always say, like, fun fact about me is I'm an indie musician in my spare time. And so I think just always wanting to, always playing music and wanting to, I thought I was going to be a rock star for a while, like when I was in my 20s. And that was really a driver for me. I was building the band and the brand and all these experience-based stuff. You just were building stuff constantly. And so I find that creativity and that sort of a little bit of a punk rock sort of attitude, I think really helps me to kind of position us to stay lean and indie, but be disruptors and still be able to kind of, be alongside bigger organizations that have maybe more establishment or they're just more well-known in the space. I think that we still have this great opportunity to be on the same playing field as people just because of some of those differentiators that the companies really lead into rather than try to, make D55 be like another company. It's like we try to lean into the things that make us really unique. So I think that's helped too.
Definitely. Having that artistic punk against the grain vibe has really differentiated you for sure. So I'm kind of curious, you've mentioned in a different interview that walking a financial tightrope is a challenge that you have. I'd love to hear about what that means exactly in your day-to-day life.
How much time do you have? We could talk about this for 3 days. That's just the monologue. Some real talk too is I was, people think that after the startup phase that, you're more stable, but I've actually found the opposite in a way to say the startup days, I kind of have nostalgia for them. I'm like, oh, it was so great when you could just say yes to everything. And it was everything was smaller in terms of your risks and responsibilities, what you were trying to build even, what you were investing into. So I found that one thing that I was not prepared for and that I'm still kind of learning how to manage and deal with in terms of the stress levels is once you bring in revenue, you're that's great. In the startup days, I'm everything's a win. But then when you're actually investing back into your company and trying to grow different aspects of it, for us, we've been trying to build our own IP for a couple of years and monetize a whole different part of the business, which is a whole different revenue model and a much different value for what the business can do in the future. For me as a woman entrepreneur, that's super important. But I found that once you're reinvesting in the business, you all of a sudden, if a couple of things go wrong in a row, you're like, oh my God, like all the cash has gone into reinvesting in that side of the business. So you almost find yourself with just more responsibilities and risks and less safety than you would think as you actually mature in the business, which is, no one told me that. That's not in like people don't talk about that a lot, but I'm like, I think that's a real talk moment to say it doesn't get less scary. It actually gets more scary because you're going for bigger, bolder things, and you're, maybe taking on riskier investments in terms of what you're doing with the company. So that's been something that I've been learning to deal with. And especially on the stress level side, I find that whatever coping mechanisms I had for year 1 to 3, I'm like, that doesn't work anymore. Like there's just things you have to kind of think about to say, like, how can you keep yourself calm and strategic and creative in terms of like that whole mix of things that you like constantly have to deal with on the financial side, so that you can grow, but you can also maintain your sustainability and sort of safety. But sometimes, like, say, traditional banks, like they might not be supporting your business as much as other businesses, so you don't have some of those safeties in your portfolio that other businesses can lean on. So you're operating in a totally different space, and you have to think totally differently to kind of make that work, sort of thing.
It does sound like playing the game on hard mode.
Yes, I know. That's like extra hard level.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I'm curious, was there ever a moment where you thought the business wouldn't make it?
I think at least once a year I have that feeling. So once a year so it's happened, 8 times now. And it's been different along the way. And sometimes I laugh at like year 1 to 3 Lauralee, because I'm like, oh my gosh, she didn't know what was going to happen in year 5 to 6, I invested in a lot of hiring, and that was a really challenging space for me at the time as like a small like indie business, and investing that much that quickly really brought a lot of precarity into like the whole business structure and sustainability. And then even investing in, our IP and then needing that to monetize like a bit more quickly than we've been able to monetize it. Like those things are all really scary and do put your business at risk. And I hope like one day I'll not laugh, but with like a glass of wine, be like, oh, haha, those, remember that time that like this happened, and you went from like a 6-month runway to like a 2-week runway or whatever it is. I think it's good for people to hear that too. Like they always say, oh, have this, a safety net of 3 months or emergency funds. Like with the business, you kind of are always thinking in the same way, but it's the fluctuation of what can happen in your business with any set of circumstances at any given time. Sometimes there's things like beyond your control that all happen at the same time. And I think that most people can usually figure it out. You have to get really strategic and creative when like those things, and you always have to plan for like the worst set of things happening all at once. Once in a while you'll go through a cycle where like 5 really bad things all happen at once. If one of them happened at once, it would be bad. But when 5 of them happened, you're like, this is not good. You don't really actually know how it's going to work out a lot of the time. So you're kind of like free jumping, or like, what's that called when people jump off a building?
Oh, skydiving.
Yeah.
Skydiving. Yeah.
Yeah. Without a parachute. Like, yeah.
Like you mentioned, you came out of that. And I think that really is a great segue into our next topic, because you've mentioned this concept of smart scaling before. So I'd love to dive into what does that mean to you, and also the creativity and innovation that you bring to that as well.
Yeah, I've been thinking about smart scaling because a couple of years ago, I kind of like there was a model of scaling, and it was really this mix of things like how many people are on your team, like do you have a studio space, do you have like there was like these definers that people would say, oh, your business is growing if these things are happening. And I kind of bought into that for a while. Obviously, like the past couple of years have been so disruptive with like so many disruption points that it's been hard to even like figure out what is stable and what's not. But I was kind of coming into like when my company started growing and started seeing like the opportunities to grow, I was thinking almost like more traditional definers of like what scaling meant. And it meant like, oh, you hire somebody, and then you hire another person, and then you get like a studio space, and then, this and this and that. And what I've found with smart scaling is like, it's actually the opposite of that. It's like you have to look at like, what do you need to produce, but what's also bringing value back into your business. And like, maybe it's not those traditional markers, but the thing that I've kind of like stopped doing is saying like, okay, whatever people think scaling is, people in your family, your friend, like whatever it is, other business like organizations or people in like the business world or in like your industry, you kind of have to like just like let that go out of your head and say like, what does scaling mean for me? Like if it's my dollar that I'm putting in, like, what do I want to get out of it? And like, what is the most valuable thing that like I can really feel good about? For me, it was like really thinking about like, okay, smart scaling for me means more like the creation part. So maybe that means we don't have a studio, because if we're paying money for the studio, then we're not paying money for the creation part, which is the thing that has the most value for the future of the company. That's how I think about smart scaling, to say like, don't get trapped into the way scaling might look for someone else. Like if you're the guarantor of everything and like you have to risk everything, it's like, yeah, you want to see that value back, and you want to make sure that like whatever scaling you're doing, like that's going to, future you is going to be really, really happy about it, or really like, proud or content or safe because you made those decisions. So that's kind of how I look at it now.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So what was the turning point for you when you realized, I got to start approaching this differently? I got to look at scaling in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of chaos. I know that there was like a couple shocks that my business went through that I was not expecting. And I know every business has them. And so for me, it was some of the investments that I had made just like really, really went sideways and didn't work out. And actually not only didn't work out, but actually was like detrimental to the future of the company. So that was a big shock to say like, okay, that money is now gone and that value is not here now or in the future. And you're now like more tired. Like
it was that chaos and those shocks that made you think like, it's got to be different. Have there been any personal sacrifices that you've had to make to scale like that?
Yeah, totally. This is like the thing that people don't see. It's like you sacrifice some of your own safety. So there's obviously been times where like I haven't paid myself to pay my team or to get through a project. Like if that is ever the case, there's always like things where you're like, you will do anything for the business, sometimes at your own detriment. And sometimes, people will say like, oh, well, why would you do that? It's like, well, I don't know, start a business and then like tell me what you do in that situation. But a lot of safety and a lot of like giving up moments of my life for the business and for like the future of the business. And sometimes that's hard because you don't know the things that you're now not going to experience because you've investing so much time or energy into building the business. So, and like a lot of sanity, I would say. I have that like indie musician thing where I'm like, you just kind of like make it through. But I do find that it's like really uncomfortable most of the time. If you're constantly thinking about it, it never shuts off. It's just always with you. It's like another part of your persona in a way. And I know people say like, you have to put up boundaries and stuff, but it is really hard to do that when you're also like, I have to make sure the payroll's ready. I have to make sure all of our deliverables, and I have to make sure this new part of the business is ready. It's just so many things. One thing that I've put back into my life that I kind of did stop for a bit, and it wasn't even with the business, but just like life in general. I did stop making music for a couple of years, and that was really, really bad for me. So one of the things I've been able to do over the past couple of years is get back into music in a way that feeds back into the business as well. And it's even like with our own subculture content and our own content we're doing, that's all helping with like the creation part. So I think it's also good not to forget about the other parts of you that support the business but have nothing to do with the business.
Yeah. That to me, that really goes back to what you were saying earlier about how some of the coping mechanisms you had before don't work. And that's so key to hold on to for that reason, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit here. So what are your top lessons about that you would like to pass on about managing cash flow in a time of growth, especially when costs are high right now with inflation and everything else going on?
I know, it's such a nightmare. I have a couple things, and I think this is really, really important, especially for founders that might be like solo, like they don't have, another founder, or they don't have like a managing team that can help them with some of the high level strategy. For me, one of the biggest things was like lean. So I almost went back to like the start of the company. Like I had mentioned, I was scaling up in a certain way, and then that was all kind of going sideways. So it's like, okay, just bring it back to the beginning and then think lean. And that doesn't mean you're not scaling or growing. It just looks different. I found that like just really looking at everything and being like, do I need this? I think having some sort of like assessment system every year to be like, what is still providing value? And like A, you don't even know what it is, and B, it's not providing value, or the worst, like if it's detracting from the value of like what you're trying to do, it's like, okay, that has to go. I think getting creative with cash flow, because I feel like sometimes people don't think it's a creative process, especially when you're having trouble with cash flow or you're like in one of those down periods, which again, it happens to everybody, no matter what you do. I'm like, it's going to happen to everybody. And it's probably going to happen more often than you would like. Whenever I'm getting a little bit worried, like I'm like, oh, okay, our runway is like shrinking really quickly because of these things, like, oh my God, the entrepreneur's worst nightmare. I just think about like maybe the opportunities that could help support that in the short term and long term. Because sometimes you pull out like these diamonds in the rough that you know, you might not spend as much time on like smaller opportunities rather than the bigger, more sexy ones. It's like maybe you go back to like some of, again, the basics, like what are your friendlies and like your network, like who would want to maybe produce a smaller pilot project, like just stuff like that where it's like you can just maybe sleep a little bit better like for a week or whatever. But I also think it's really creative to think like it's not just one thing when you're trying to build in safety and sustainability when that is happening to your business. Just think about all the opportunities that are there and then start doing those reach outs, and like, you'll be surprised about who kind of shows up for some of those things when you least expect it.
To me, it shows that classic scrappiness, right? Like finding the opportunities, knocking on doors, virtually or otherwise. So I'm kind of curious, you mentioned cash flow and you've been a client of Fund Through for quite some time. I would love to know what led you to Fund Through and the influence that invoice factoring has had in your growth.
Yeah, I know I always say this, but I'm like, I love Fund Through. It's been such a important part of the whole strategy for my business, especially as an indie. But I'm one of those entrepreneurs that traditional banks just don't like. So I've had a lot of challenges in getting some of what you need in terms of financial support or systems that you can count on. I've had a lot of trouble building some of those for my business. When I found you, I was like, they're doing what I always thought would be like just the perfect way to support entrepreneurs and support the variability and just like the real timeness of what happens when you have a business, especially an indie business. So the way it's really just been such an important part of my financial strategy is the agileness, the sort of adaptability. It actually fits what you need as an indie business, where if I go to a traditional bank, I'll hear from them in 6 months. I'm like, that doesn't help anybody. Like, it's like my business will be closed if I'm waiting around. It's just not going to work. So I find that the Fund Through model just really does speak to what businesses need in real time. So like you don't have to be reactive, you can be proactive about stuff. So that's a game changer for me because I can actually use some of those financial supports with the invoice factoring for, immediate like operational needs, strategic needs. I just feel like it's one of those models that actually speaks to what businesses need, and it works and functions the way businesses need it to as well. Like it's transparent, you have your dashboard, you always know what's happening. It's just such a breath of fresh air. Like you're like, when normally it is so difficult to get support like that.
I think that also kind of goes back to, like you were saying, the agility. You can take on those other opportunities that might be a little bit difficult otherwise if you didn't have that cash. It all kind of ties together.
This is what, like, I had a term for it, high functioning financial support. And again, especially, it's not to knock traditional banks, but like it's so behind when you would ever need support that it's almost not viable for a lot of businesses. So the Fund Through model is just like a really high functioning, like really built for entrepreneurs and indie businesses and businesses.
I love that. So you've mentioned it a few times about banks, and yeah, that's a sticking point for so many of our clients. So I'm kind of curious, do you have any experiences you can share, tips to do or not do that would help your fellow CEOs out there?
I would say you always try, even though I'm like, it can be really frustrating and even like it could be really disheartening. Every year I put a case forward and say like, this is what the business is doing. This is where we're at. You just get up and you keep asking, even though you're like, and then you just have to brush yourself off if it's a no again. And you just have to, again, just like, don't depend on it, but always ask for what you need.
It's not the final word, right? It could still happen and it's worth asking. The worst they can say is no. So
exactly. So you should still ask for what you need and see what happens.
Fair enough. So, Lauralee, this was such a great conversation. Is there anything you wanted to add that I didn't ask about?
I do want to maybe highlight again the fact that for me, sort of researching financial partnerships and ways to have financial stability. And I think every founder should really look at what's out there, and, Fund Through is just something that like was really game changing for me. And I really struggled with some of my relationships with the traditional financing institutions. And so I think people should just do their research and find good partners, because that could be the difference between your company making it or not. So I think like putting that strategy first and finding what works for you and what your needs are, and looking for maybe the disruptors in the financial space that can be more agile and have different models. Because sometimes I think people think they only have certain options, but I think if you research and you look at your financial sort of ecosystem in that strategic way, then you can really come up with, it could really save your business and save your sanity at the same time. So I think don't ever be limited by what you think is out there. Like always look at all the options and all the possibilities and kind of go from there in terms of like what your strategy might be.
I think you hit on something really salient there about a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs think that the bank is their only option. And then when they get shut down, they're like, well, what now? Understandably so, but there, like you said, there's a lot more out there that people don't realize is available.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good time for that. There's really creative things happening. It's been really exciting for me. And again, sometimes those relationships can really be the difference between your business, like having sustainability or not. So I think, just get disruptive with your own thinking about how those financial partnerships, what they look like and what they could be. We know the stats are bad for like investment in women or diverse entrepreneurs or whatever it is. So I'm like, especially for entrepreneurs that fall in those categories where you do have like, it is harder and there is systemic barriers and stuff. It's like looking for the people that are beyond that and can help support your business. I think just finding that as early as you can and asking as early as you can will just provide so much safety for you, or just like you can think about your business rather than floundering or around or freaking out. I think it's really important to build in that safety and that ecosystem as early as you can.
If you had to give your top takeaways for anybody going through Smart, who wants to scale Smart, who's facing these challenges, what would they be?
Okay, so this is what I've learned. I'm working on building it in for my company, but these are the things that I've been thinking about and the things I think are really important for an indie business like mine, but I think any business. So diversifying revenue is one thing. My company specifically, a lot of the stuff we did in the early years of the company was service producing. So we produced stuff for other people and then give it away, which seemed so exciting. But when you think about how like once a project is done, you're like, there's nothing, you're done. That whole model can be very precarious. So I find that if you can diversify revenue, like if you can think about it, try not to only have a service-based business. If there's anything else that you can do, reoccurring revenue just seems like a dream, like a dreamy thing to have. And I know once you're there's other problems that come up, but I think thinking about your revenue streams and diversifying them as early as you can without overstepping or pushing your cash flow, but starting that process early, I think, by year 5, you'll be like, thank God I did that. Or thank God, like I started doing that 2 years ago. So now my business has more stability. The other thing is that we were talking about this, to think about your scaling, like your definers for what scaling means, and then don't get trapped in the buzz of things like, oh, I need to hire this role, or I need to have like a cool studio. Like maybe you do, but maybe you don't. Just think about your definers and what that means for you, because it might not be the traditional things or the things that everybody else is doing. And then make sure that when you reinvest in your business, that there is a clear value back. So for me, as I had mentioned, like that really was saying like it's the creation part for me and my company, because I know that will have value in the future. Like if I'm investing in creation, then I can go get a distribution deal for that. Having IP and having creation be what we're reinvesting in. It took me a while to like really like say like that's my definer for reinvestment. Anything else, probably not, because people can bring you great ideas, or you can get excited about so many things, but like you kind of have to like be a minimalist in a way. Otherwise you'll just drown in, all the ideas or all the possibilities. So that was something that I'm still kind of learning that. And I've learned some really hard lessons about the fact that minimalist focus on what the reinvestment needs to look like. It took me a while to figure that out. So I think that's really important to say, like, think about that and like kind of define 1 or 2 or 3 things that are really important and valuable for your business in the future so that you're working on that now.
Well, thank you so much, Lauralee, for coming on. This was a great discussion. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Let's review the key points for you to apply. Decide on your own definition of smart scaling to get focused on where to invest most. Ensure whatever you reinvest in has a clear return. This is critical to avoid chasing common beliefs about scaling that might not fit your business. For Lauralee, scaling smart meant a laser focus on content creation for reinvestment decisions. Next, take a brutally honest look at all expenses and decide what is contributing value, what isn't, and what's detracting in the context of your definition of smart scaling, even if it's hard to let go of. Third, Diversify revenue streams in your service business early within your cash flow to build stability into your business. And finally, explore and consider non-traditional ways of funding your business. If banks say no, alternative solutions like invoice factoring can help.
Thanks for listening to Cash Flow and Tell. From all of us at FundThrough, we hope this episode got you one step closer to growing the business of your dreams. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you next time.